To say that truth is not. To say that truth is not out there is simply to say that where there are no sentences there is no truth, that sentences are elements of human languages, and that languages are human creations. The suggestion that truth is out there is a legacy of an age in which the world was seen as the creation of a being who had a language his own. Richard Rorty. Richard Rorty was a highly influential American philosopher known for his controversial brand of pragmatism, often termed neopragmatism. He fundamentally challenged the traditional idea of philosophy as a quest for objective, foundational truth that mirrors an independent reality. Instead, Rorty argued that knowledge is a linguistic and social construct, and truth is what proves useful within human practices and conversations. He advocated for a shift from epistemology, with its focus on getting things right about the world, to a more edifying and imaginative role for philosophy as a form of cultural criticism aimed at fostering richer and fuller human lives and social hope, free from dogmatic assertions about absolute truth. Richard Rorty's early life was marked by an intellectual and socially conscious upbringing. Born on October 4, 1931, in New York City, he was the only child of James Rorty and Winifred Rauschenbusch. Both his parents were prominent figures in the New York intellectual scene, active as writers, journalists, and social democrats. His father, James Rorty, was a muckraking journalist and poet, influenced by figures like Thorstein Veblen. His mother, Winifred Rauschenbusch, also a freelance journalist, came from a distinguished lineage. Her father, Walter Roskenbus, was a leading figure in the social gospel movement. This environment imbued young Richard with a strong sense of progressive politics and a critical approach to society from an early age, growing up on the anti-communist reformist left. Rorty was a precocious child, and at the remarkably young age of 15, in 1946, he enrolled in the University of Chicago's experimental Hutchins College program. This program emphasized a great books curriculum, exposing him to the foundational texts of Western thought. Despite the university's then prevailing embrace of absolutes by figures like Robert Maynard Hutchins, Rorty found himself drawn to philosophy and, after earning his BA in 1949, continued at Chicago to complete an MA in 1952, writing a thesis on Alfred North Whitehead. His intellectual journey then took him to Yale University, where he completed his PhD in 1956 with a dissertation titled The Concept of Potentiality. This early academic rigorousness, however, was also tempered by personal challenges, including his father's mental health struggles and Rorty's own experiences with depression and psychiatric analysis as a teenager and young adult. Richard Rorty's most significant work began to emerge after his early career as an analytic philosopher, while he started by publishing articles within the analytic tradition, including the influential edited volume The Linguistic Turn 1967, his thought underwent a profound shift in the 1970s. This intellectual evolution culminated in his groundbreaking and most famous book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, published in 1979. This work served as a full-scale critique of what Rorty saw as the foundational projects of modern philosophy, particularly the idea that the mind is a mirror that accurately reflects an external reality and that philosophy's role is to ensure the accuracy of this reflection. He argued that the pursuit of objective, universal foundations for knowledge was a misguided endeavor, tracing this representationalist paradigm through Descartes, Locke, and Kant. Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature was a bombshell in the philosophical world, marking his decisive break from analytic philosophy and establishing him as a leading figure in neopragmatism. Following this, Rorty continued to develop his anti-foundationalist and anti-representationalist views, often engaging with continental philosophy and drawing inspiration from thinkers like Dewey, Wittgenstein, and Heidegger. His subsequent major works elaborated on the implications of his pragmatist stance for various aspects of philosophy and culture. Consequences of Pragmatism, Essays, 1972 to 1980. 1982 collected many of his essays from the period leading up to and immediately following Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, further solidifying his position. Science as Solidarity, 1987, included in Objectivity, Relativism, and Truth. While this essay's title might not immediately scream fallibilism, Rorty's argument that science, like other human endeavors, is ultimately a form of solidarity agreement among inquirers rather than a quest for absolute, objective truth, directly implies a fallibilist understanding of scientific knowledge. Scientific theories are accepted not because they perfectly mirror reality, but because they are the best current tools for predicting and controlling our environment, and they are always open to being superseded by better tools. His next major monograph, Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity, published in 1989, delved more deeply into the cultural and political implications of his ideas. In this book, Rorty explored how societies might function if they embraced the contingency of their beliefs, practices, and vocabularies, rather than seeking universal foundations. He introduced the concept of the liberal ironist, a person who acknowledges the contingency of their own final vocabulary while remaining committed to liberal values and the alleviation of suffering. He differentiated between a public sphere focused on solidarity and a private sphere where individuals could pursue self-creation through ironic redecryption. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, Rorty continued to publish prolifically, often through collections of essays that further developed his themes and applied them to contemporary political and cultural issues. These included Objectivity, Relativism, and Truth, Philosophical Papers I 1991, Essays on Heidegger and Others, Philosophical Papers II 1991, Putnam and the Relativist Menace 1993, also often in Truth and Progress. In this essay, Rorty discusses the criticisms he received, particularly from Hilary Putnam, regarding his supposed relativism. He clarifies his position, emphasizing that his fallibilism is not a claim that anything goes, but rather an acknowledgement that all knowledge is historically contingent and socially constructed, and therefore always revisable. His defense against the charge of relativism hinges on the idea that despite the absence of absolute foundations, we can still have criteria for better and worse beliefs within a given community of inquirers, and these criteria themselves are fallible. Truth Without Correspondence to Reality 1995-1996, often included in Truth and Progress. While Truth and Progress was mentioned, this specific essay within it is a prime example of how Rorty's account of truth is deeply intertwined with fallibilism. He argues that truth is a commendatory term we apply to beliefs that work for us, not a description of a correspondence between language and a non-linguistic reality. This pragmatist view of truth inherently implies fallibility, as what works for us is always subject to change and improvement. Achieving Our Country, Leftist Thought in 20th Century America 1998, Truth and Progress, Philosophical Papers 3 1998, and Philosophy and Social Hope 1999. Fallibilism, Objectivity, and the New Cynicism 2004. This essay directly addresses the concept of fallibilism and its relationship to objectivity. Rorty distinguishes his position from a cynical relativism by arguing that while we are indeed fallible and cannot claim absolute truth, this does not mean that inquiry is pointless or that some beliefs are not better than others for specific human purposes. Philosophy as Cultural Politics, Philosophical Papers 4, was published posthumously in 2007, the same year he passed away. Language is not an image of reality, assures Mr. Rorty, a pragmatist and anti-Platonic philosopher. Should we interpret this sentence in the sense Mr. Rorty calls Platonic, that is, as a denial of an attribute to one substance it would be contradictory. A language that is not an image of reality cannot give us a real image of its relations with reality. Therefore, the sentence must be interpreted pragmatically. It does not affirm anything about language, but only indicates the intention to use it in a certain way. The main thesis of Mr. Rorty's thought is a declaration of intentions. The sentence "language is not an image of reality" rigorously means this and nothing else. I, Richard Rorty, am firmly decided to not use language as an image of reality. It is the sort of unanswerable argument, an expression of someone's will cannot be logically refuted. Therefore, there is nothing to debate. Keeping the limits of decency and law, Mr. Rorty can use language as he may wish. The problem appears when he begins to try to make us use language exactly like him. He states that language is not a representation of reality, but rather a set of tools invented by man in order to accomplish his desires. But this is a false alternative. A man may well desire to use this tool to represent reality. It seems that Plato desired precisely this. But Mr. Rorty denies that men have other desires than seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. That some declare to desire something else must be very painful to him, for, on the contrary, there would be no pragmatically valid explanation for the effort he puts in changing the conversation. Given the impossibility to deny that these people exist, the pragmatist will perhaps say that those who look for representing reality are moved by the desire to avoid pain as much as those who prefer to create fantasies, but this objection will have shown precisely that these are not things which exclude each other. The Rortyan alternative is false in its own terms. Olavo de Carvalho, O Imbecile Coltivo, The Collective Imbecile, 5th ed. Pages 60 to 67. Translo by Pedro Set Camara. References: Robert Brandom summarizes Rorty's anti-representationalism. In a nutshell, this is how I think Rorty's critique of semantic representationalism goes. Normative relations are exclusively intravocabulary. Extravocabulary relations are exclusively causal. Representation purports to be both a normative relation, supporting assessments of correctness and incorrectness, and a relation between representings within a vocabulary and representeds outside of that vocabulary. Therefore, the representational model of the relation of vocabularies to their environment should be rejected. Brandom, Robert. October 11, 2000. Vocabularies of Pragmatism, Synthesizing Naturalism and Historicism. In Rorty and His Critics. Malden, Massachusetts p. 160. ISBN 0-631-20981-6. OCLC 43109795. Rorty distinguished between knowledge that and knowledge how. Only language users can have knowledge that, epistemically valid knowledge, while all life forms, including bacteria and virus, can have knowledge how know-how. Rorty, Richard. October 11, 2000. Response to Barry Allen. In Rorty and His Critics. Malden, Massachusetts, pages 238 to 239. ISBN 0-631-20981-6. OCLC 43109795. The ironist spends her time worrying about the possibility that she has been initiated into the wrong tribe, taught to play the wrong language game. She worries that the process of socialization which turned her into a human being by giving her a language may have given her the wrong language, and so turned her into the wrong kind of human being. But she cannot give a criterion of wrongness. So, the more she is driven to articulate her situation in philosophical terms, the more she reminds herself of her rootlessness by constantly using terms like Weltanschauung, perspective, dialectic, conceptual framework, historical epoch, language game, redecryption, vocabulary, and irony. Rorty, Richard 1989. Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Cambridge. p. 75. ISBN 0-521-35381-5. OCLC 18290785. Casey Nelson Blake, Private Life and Public Commitment, from Walter Roskenbus to Richard Rorty, in A Pragmatist's Progress. Richard Rorty and American Intellectual History, ed. John Pettigrew. Roman and Littlefield, 2000, 85. ISBN 9780847690626. Ryerson, James. The Quest for Uncertainty, Richard Rorty's Pragmatic Pilgrimage. Lingua Franca Volume 10, No. 9. December 2000 January 2001. Mendieta, Eduardo. July 22, 2017. Rorty and Post-Truth. La Revue of Books. Retrieved April 13, 2023. Rorty, Richard. November 2007. The Fire of Life. Poetry Magazine. Richard Rorty, Short Obituary, June 9, 2007. Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press, 1989. Pages 11 to 22. ISBN 978-0521353816. Rorty argues that Nietzsche was the first philosopher to propose to totally abandon the concept of objective truth. For Nietzsche, human beings should draw consolation not simply by trying to rise from the condition of pure animality, but by the awareness of having self-created. Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press, 1989. Pages 23 to 43. ISBN 978-0521353816.